Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition, our final edition of Saints minicamp. Time off about to come for the New Orleans Saints as they get ready for training camp, which is just 6 weeks away. I'm Jim Derry along with my friend Jeff Duncan, and we're here to talk about what has happened this week. Saints have wrapped up minicamp. And before we get you started, we thank our sponsor, Tulane Doctors, and a reminder that today's coverage of the Saints minicamp is sponsored by Tulane Doctors, proudly bringing the future of medicine to New Orleans every day. Find your doctor at TulaneDoctors.com. Dunk, what is going on this afternoon?
Well, summer's here, right? So, minicamp just wrapped up. We had 3 days out at Saints Complex. It was really good. A lot of good work, I thought, and a lot of positive vibes. I was just telling Patrick off the air before we came on. I'm actually changing my column for the weekend because there's just been such optimism out there. And this is obviously the time of year when you get that in the NFL. I mean, everybody's undefeated. I try not to get caught up in it, but there's no doubt it's a different vibe than we've seen the last couple of years.
Well, I talked about on Datitude this morning as well with Doug Mouton that, one of the things about this year that's different is, and no offense to Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton, but when you got a guy like Derek Carr that, to me, that Drew Brees is gone, he's never coming back. But that being said, I mean, to me, Derek Carr is the closest thing to a real top-notch quarterback that this team has had over the past 2.5 years since Drew left.
Yeah, and I think he's better, at least what I've seen so far, JD. He's better than I thought he was. Now they haven't played a game yet. We haven't seen anything in action. But just the general first impression, he's just better than I thought he was. I mean, I didn't know what to expect, but his arm's stronger. That's definitely apparent. I know what his arm strength was going to be like. It just all the qualities as far as like leadership and tangibles, the guy just gets it. And I think that's exactly what they needed at that position. And now we're starting to see it in the locker room. Even the veteran players, I talked to Tyrann Mathieu yesterday about it. They're all starting to buy in because, like you said, they've got a quarterback. They got one of those guys. I mean, he's not Patrick Mahomes, but he's better than what they've had there. And that might have been the missing element for this team.
I can't wait to tell the naysayers how wrong they were about Derek Carr. I have an excellent feeling about Derek Carr. I really do. I think that he's the kind of guy that can be with this team for 6 to 8 years. Again, not Drew Brees. No one's ever going to be Drew Brees again. But this team doesn't have to have Drew Brees to be a winning franchise. I mean, I think they have a lot of the pieces in place, Duncan. I think that Dennis Allen, and I know people are not believing in Dennis Allen, but I think this is a year where both these guys can prove a lot of people wrong. And they both want to do that.
Yeah, Derek Carr even admitted this week that he felt like he didn't really give the best version of himself to the Raiders. I thought that was really notable that he kind of admitted that he almost needed this kind of wake-up call in his career. So I think the Saints are getting a better version of Derek Carr than even the Raiders saw the last few years. And sometimes you need that in life. It's not just NFL players, just anybody. You're in a rut, you kind of just going through the motions. You don't even know it. And you look up, and he's been in that place for 9 years. A change of scenery, a different voice in his ear, different outlook, can change the way you carry yourself into work. And just the other players, the coaches, I think there's a lot of momentum going on right now, a lot of positive vibes. Like I said, I think a lot of it's rooted in Derek Carr.
Chemo Slice says he's loving your Beastie Boys shirt, by the way.
Yes, one of my favorite shirts came out. Tell him, since way back in the day of the early Beastie Boys. So, very proud owner of this shirt.
Well, you and I know a little bit about something about way back in the day because we're getting way up in the day as it goes. All right, tell me what have you seen? What did you see from minicamp? Obviously, the first group event where it was mandatory. They had the voluntary workouts and OTAs, but this was for real. That they all had to be there this week. And what did you see out there this week that has led you to feel as optimistic as it seems you do?
Well, Carr looks great. I mean, he's in command of the offense. Now, Cam Jordan yesterday sat and held court and made a great point. I mean, the offense is going to shine during this time. There's no real pass rush. Nobody's in full pads. So it's really not football. That's what Cam was basically trying to get across to everybody. It's going to be easy for the quarterback to find receivers. They got way more time than they would have in a game to find those receivers. So, yeah, the offense should shine, but he looks in command, and even more so than I thought he would this early into the installation. This is really about the second time he's gone to the playbook, and ball comes out quick. He's got, like I talked about, his arm strength. There's just a lot of good things you're seeing out of him, and that's with the fact that Mike Thomas isn't out there right now. Taysom Hill just got out there. Alvin Kamara just got out there, and two of his starting offensive linemen, Cesar Ruiz and Trevor Penning, aren't out there. So you start to see the potential there, right? I mean, this really take off when all these pieces get in place offensively. Defensively, I think they have better depth than they've had in a while, especially in the secondary. So they're going to have some tough cuts there. But we just don't know yet. The Achilles heel I see could be the defensive line. And it's almost impossible to evaluate them right now because of what we said. It's non-contact. All the things that you look for in pass rush and run stopping, it really isn't being displayed right now. So it's hard to really evaluate, this team in full until we get to training camp.
I want to go back to the offensive side of the ball, and people have been raving over Chris Olave, and obviously, like you said, it's hard to tell as much because they're going to be open. They're not covering them like they will cover. They're not hitting. But people have been raving over Olave and the fact that he could be primed to have a breakout kind of sophomore season.
Well, what I think's evident, JD, is he's formed a very quick connection with Derek Carr. There's a trust level there that's happened almost immediately, and I think that's a positive sign. Forget all the hype of what's happening during the camp and who's catching balls. Like, it's more about the osmosis like reads between the quarterback and the receiver and them being on the same page. And we're seeing that early. And that's important because Derek Carr is going to obviously go to Chris Olave a lot during the season. So that connection, and he's going to have to develop that same kind of connection with Michael Thomas on the other side. So, and they're using Olave a lot of different places. He's a smart guy. He's taking that next step that you'd expect from a guy in his second year.
One thing that Doug brought up on Dat this morning, and I guess, I mean, I don't necessarily 100% agree with him, but I see his point is, if you can't assume that Michael Thomas is going to be healthy. You hope he is. It looks like he's going to be. It looks like he's excited about the prospect of what this season could become and what this team can become under Derek Carr. But if he isn't, you do worry a little bit about the wide receiver depth. They bring in Kiki Qt yesterday, who was a former starter for the Texans. But are you concerned about the depth at receiver?
Not at all. No, I think they're fine there. I mean, there's a lot riding on Mike Thomas. We know that. But look, he knows that. I mean, we're going to get the best version of Michael Thomas this year. He's on a 1-year contract. He took a huge pay cut. This is a big crossroads part of a season for him in his career. He's got to produce this.
What is he, 30 years old, right?
Right. And he's 30 years old. Not a lot of guys produce at that position into their 30s. But the way he plays, I do think it's a little different. You're not judging. I mean, he's more of a possession receiver. He's never been a fast guy. That's not his strength. His strength's making competitive catches, using his physicality against DBs, and he can still do that, I think, as long as he stays healthy. So it's not about speed with him. That's not his game. But I do think what we're seeing of him on and off the field should be expected because he has to be on his best behavior if he wants to get paid again a second time in this league, whether it's with the Saints or another team.
And what Mike Thomas is exactly what this team needs. I mean, you got the burner. Olave can do a bunch of different things. Shaheed, assuming he's healthy, obviously is the burner, the old Devery Henderson type, right? Man, if Mike Thomas comes back and is half of his former self and can be that big-time possession receiver, man, this passing game looks like it could be as good as any other in the league.
Yeah, I think, what we saw from Mike Thomas early last year, that Atlanta game was a prime example. He just made some of the big plays when they needed him, right? He caught the big go-ahead touchdown at the end, in tight coverage against a good corner and A.J. Terrell. So, that's what he brings to the table that they really haven't had But I think they've got some decent veteran depth there. You know, Brian Edwards, you mentioned Kute. Lynn Bowden's a talented guy. He's had a little bit of a checkered career, but no one's ever doubted his talent. There's a lot of pieces there. And look, I think a guy that people don't want to sleep on here is Kirk Merritt. I mean, he's a guy not only talked about, but he's a talented athlete. And I'm not sure they know exactly where he's going to end up. I think he's going to probably end up at running back. But, man, this is a guy you get on the field, I think, and he can run after the catch as well as anybody on the team. There's a lot more options, I think. And Derek Carr is the kind of guy that can exploit those options more so than what they've had there before.
They've been talking about Kirk Merritt for a couple of years now, as he's been kind of like a shining spot in a couple of preseasons now. The pride of Destrehan High School, by the way.
Yes.
So if you can get a local guy in there and give him a real chance, that'd be a really good thing. Before I go on, I want to remind you once again, today's coverage of the Saints minicamp is sponsored by Tulane Doctors. You know that because it's on your screen. We're probably bringing the future of medicine to New Orleans every day. Find your doctor at TulaneDoctors.com. On the defensive side of the ball, we haven't talked much about the secondary, and a lot. Again, it's early, but Marshawn Lattimore has had his issues with his injury string. Tyrann Mathieu maybe didn't produce like a lot of people thought he might coming in. I thought Paulson Adebo has been great. And Alante Taylor, his rookie season was incredible. But what do you see for this defensive backfield? Have you noticed anything through minicamp, and how do you expect them to come together as we just 6 weeks from training camp now?
Well, I think the biggest competition position battle on the team is at the spot opposite Marshawn Lattimore, the left corner spot where Paulson Adebo and Alante Taylor are pretty much going to take this competition for the starting job, I bet, deep into camp. Both of them are alternating with the first team offense. Taylor's also seeing a lot of work in the slot. So if Adebo were to win that job, it wouldn't shock me to see Taylor become the starter there in the slot. Right now, Bradley Roby's manning that spot. But they got a lot of versatility in the secondary. That's a big thing for Joe Woods, the new defensive coordinator. Marcus Robertson, the new secondary coach, talked about that as well. You want guys that can play multiple positions. And I'm writing about it soon for our paper is, they got to get more takeaways. I mean, historically, last year, JD, I don't think people 100%. Realize it. They had the fewest takeaways in the history of the franchise, 14. Yeah. I mean, that's unheard of. I think they had, 7 interceptions. Just think about that.
And I think 3 of those came in the last couple of games. So that's a little skewed. I think they only had 3 going into the Cleveland Browns game when I think Mathieu intercepted Deshaun Watson. I think they had 2 picks in that game, if I remember correctly. But, so if you think about that, 3 of them coming in the last few games there, you only have 3 or 4 going into week 14. That's got to change.
Yeah. I mean, if you just put it in perspective, the Super Bowl year, Darren Sharper had 9 picks by himself. Yeah. Returned 3 of them for touchdowns.
Yeah.
So, that shows you the difference in a great season and about a 500 season. I think that turns around this year, no doubt about it. It's kind of almost an anomaly last year. It was so low. They've been consistently averaging in the low 20s. So out of nowhere, they get a 14. I think just out of sheer regression to the mean, they'll get back closer to 20. And Dennis Allen's made a really good point. And I think the way the Saints look at it, it's a symptom. It's not the problem. It's a symptom of bigger problems. And that was the offense never getting them a lot of leads and also them failing to stop the run as they have in the past. So people didn't have to pass as much. So between those 2 things, if they can improve their run defense, and we think they've improved their offense, certainly with Derek Carr, that should allow them to kind of be in more advantageous position in games to create more takeaways. And I think they're right there.
Dunk, you think about the 2 greatest coaches in this franchise's history, unquestionably Sean Payton and Jim Mora. Their 2 big things always were takeaway margin. You had to be well positive throughout the course of a season and every game, really, and time of possession. And both of those coaches harped on those things. And if you look at last year, I think they struggled in both of those efforts. Obviously, turnover margin was a big deal. So turnover margin leads to you having a better time of possession. The Saints win when they win both of those, categories. And I think there's going to be major emphasis put on both of those things this year.
Yeah, and I think offensively, we haven't really talked much about this really on any of the programs, but I think the running game is going to be important for the Saints this
No
year.
question.
You know, they get their offensive line back healthy. Trevor Penning, by the way, is going to have a procedure today. Might have already had it in Birmingham to have that hardware taken out of his foot. It's a routine procedure, so he'll be ready for the start of camp. Same with Cesar Ruiz. Get those guys back. They're supposed to be ready for the start of camp. But having that offensive line intact and a force at left tackle like Trevor Penning. I mean, this guy is a road grader there. He's going to struggle, I think, still in pass protection, but there's no doubt he's an elite run blocker. That should help that running game, even without Alvin Kamara. You got Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller, the rookie should be healthy for the start of camp. That's the plan for him. They've got to be able to run the ball on teams to improve that time of possession.
Patrick, if you want to show that last comment from Jerry, because I think it's a good question. He asked our friend Jerry, who's always here with us, which Saints player surprised you the most at minicamp? Thank you.
Wow, that's a good question. I would say there's a couple of guys. One, I know it sounds silly, but I mean, I think Derek Carr. I mean, he's way better than I thought he was. So I think he stands out to me the most, and that's probably why everybody's been uplifted. There's been a few guys, like some under the radar guys. I mentioned Kirk Merritt. No one really talks much about him. I think he's a very underrated player on this team. Lucas Kroll, young tight end, who I think is going to have a future with the New Orleans Saints. He needs to add a little weight, but man, he can catch the ball and he can run, and the Saints like his potential. There's a couple of young linebackers that played well the last few days. Nefi Sewell, who had a really nice day yesterday.
Had a great preseason last year.
Yeah, broke up some passes yesterday. You can see he's much more comfortable. And there's a rookie here that I want to bring up. He's undrafted. And, you know, Jeff Ireland had told me about this kid, Anthony Orji from Vanderbilt. Now, he's a classic undrafted free agent. Can't really run that well. That's why he didn't get drafted. But, man, he looks the part out there. He's smart. He's always around the ball. I think he's going to have a chance to stick. He made a couple of nice plays in red zone drills the other day. I can see why they're high on him. And that's a position, you know, where there's I think some roster spots available after you get past the starters.
How excited should Saints fans be about the tight end situation, which has been a struggle the past few years? I think they're as solid as they've been there in quite some time.
Yeah, I don't think there's no Jimmy Graham there.
Doesn't need to be.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent there. I mean, Taysom's going to play more tight end this year, true tight end. He talked about that the other day. He's going to be more involved in the passing game as a receiving threat. That's something Pete Carmichael told me that he felt like he didn't really exploit enough last year. He took ownership of that. He said, we've got to use him more as a receiver. So I think you'll see him also involved. There's just a lot more options now than they've had in the past couple of years. And, you know, I do think Mike Thomas's health is going to be important for this team to kind of be at an elite level. But I do think even if he's not the old Mike Thomas, this team's better in so many other areas. Granted, we don't know what's going to happen with Alvin Kamara. I think that's a big factor for where this team, the ceiling for this team.
A couple more questions before we wrap up our final show here on Saints Minicamp. We've been with you for 4 weeks. It's our fourth show, going through the OTAs and now the minicamp before we take a little break. You know, we all need a little rest and relaxation. So if you want to get a comment or question in, now's your chance. And actually, Dunk's going to be on with me on Datitude next Friday morning as well as I fade away into the sunset for a couple of weeks. Dunk, I'd like to ask you before we go off ashore about how does Dennis Allen see? He's got to feel more comfortable now going into his second season as head coach. And I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that this is a better team than what he had last year. I mean, whatever their record is, none of us know the answer to that. But I think going into this season, this team is clearly better than the one he had last year. Does he look like he's more comfortable?
Yeah, no question. More confident. I think more relaxed. I mean, he turned over the defensive coaching staff. There was I think a little bit of like dysfunction there in the coaching staff that he didn't feel good about. They weren't really his guys. And he's brought in a bunch of his guys now in defense. I mean, Dennis Allen runs the defense, so it's going to be what he wants to run there. But I think he's more confident and comfortable because of that. He feels like this has become more of his team. And having Derek Carr quarterback, I don't think you can emphasize enough what that means. I mean, this is a guy he drafted with the Raiders. He knows very well, and I think he feels like they've at least got an answer there at that position that they haven't had since he's been here.
I got to say, for everyone on this team, if you put all the people together, I think the person I'm rooting most for is Dennis Allen. He caught, and I was a little hard on him at times during the season on that. But, you start realizing that this was his first time back. He had all kinds of injuries, all things bad that could happen to him did. The quarterback situation wasn't nearly solid like it should have been, I guess. And to follow in Sean Payton's footsteps is just a tough thing to do. And so I really think I'm rooting for Dennis Allen more than I'm rooting for just about anyone else wearing black and gold.
Well, I can tell you somebody else rooting for him. That's Mickey Loomis, because Mickey Loomis hired him, and he wants him to be very successful. I know I've had conversations with Mickey about that. They put a lot into this season for them to be successful. They've spent a lot of money in free agency. They've renegotiated a lot of hard work, renegotiating contracts, kind of turning over the roster, allowing him to make some difficult decisions on the coaching staff. There's been a lot of turnover here. And even for an organization that prides itself on stability, I mean, Taysom Hill talked about the other day, he feels like they're just now kind of getting back to normal that hadn't been there the last 2 years. So I think there's no question Dennis Allen knows that the last 2 years, especially his first season, it's not been good enough, not to the standards that they expect in New Orleans. They've kind of gone all in.
Yeah,
so they have to get results this year. I mean, it's an easy schedule. We've talked about it. They really avoid most of the top quarterbacks in this league. There's a lot, I think, built in for this team to be successful in a division that really is ripe for the taking now that Tom Brady's retired.
There are no excuses, and you know what? I don't think he's going to need any. All the naysayers, I think, by the time all is said and done, might quiet down just a little bit. Before I ask my final question of our show here, I'm going to remind you one last time. Today's coverage of the Saints minicamp is sponsored by Tulane Doctors, proudly bringing the future of medicine to New Orleans every day. Find your doctor at TulaneDoctors.com. Okay, Dunk, before we go off the show, let everybody know, what do the Saints do now? What does their schedule look like? Do they take some time off? I know that Mickey usually stays around for another week or so, and the coaching staff will probably stick around for another week or so before they head off. But what are the players doing now? What does the schedule look like before training camp begins at last week of July?
Well, man, they're all gone. I mean, they've all bolted.
Oh, everybody's gone.
Yeah. I talked like Tyrann Matthews headed to Nickelodeon Park with his kids, and he's going to end up in Venice. And Cam Jordan said he's going to be in Italy. And this is the time for everybody to get away. Coaches, Pete Carmichael is going to be a little league dad, traveling to baseball circuits. He's got a place like a lot of coaches. A lot of guys over in 30A take trips over there, beach houses. And then they will reconvene the last week of July. Training camp starts, I believe, July 24th, right around there. So there's not a lot of time, man. It'll be here before you know it.
No question.
So they have to get away now. And I think mentally check out, stay in shape. Obviously, the injured guys are going to have to try and continue to rehab to get ready for the start of camp. But Dennis Allen said the other day, I asked him about it, he said that they expect to have every player on the roster ready for practice, the start of training camp. He said there's one guy he's not 100% sure of, wouldn't say who it was, but otherwise, 99.9% of the roster is going to be healthy, considering you got guys like Mike Thomas, Ruiz, Penning, Kendre Miller, all those guys that haven't been practicing, they should be on the field in late July. So that's another very positive sign for the Saints.
That is a huge deal. If that can happen, because we know that, to me, health has been the primary concern for this team the past 2 years. I don't think there's any doubt about it, as Tulane Doctors is our sponsor. I mean, maybe they know something we don't. I don't know. What are you going to do? I know you're working on your book. Are you going to have any time to actually go have another Beastie Boys? They're just loving the Beastie Boys shirt. Are you going to have any time to yourself besides working on the book?
No, we got to get to the finish line. Let's talk to Steve actually this morning. We're in the final stages of finishing up this book, and
with Steve Gleason, he means, by the way.
Steve Gleason's memoir. It's going to be out next April, and we're really excited about getting that out to the public. I think people are going to be. It's an extraordinary story, as everyone knows, here in New Orleans, and having the chance to write this with Steve and his wife Michelle. Just very grateful and honored to be a part of the process. But it's going to take another month. So it should take me right up to the start of camp. So hopefully I can sneak away for a few days, JD, get some fishing in, go up north somewhere and get out of this heat. And then I'll be locked and loaded for training camp.
I was going to say, if you're going to go fishing around here, you ain't getting out of the heat.
No, I'm going to go up to Canada, I think.
Man, now I'm really jealous. All right, well, we'll talk more about it on Datitude next Friday before I escape into the Netherland. Not the Netherlands, the Netherland. I don't know where that's going to be. Might be in my bed for 2 weeks. Who the hell knows? But we thank you for joining us on the show. And Dunk, I'll see you next Friday.
All right, bud. We'll talk then. Take care.
Thanks to everyone out there for watching us the past 4 weeks. For Jeff Duncan and for behind the scenes Patrick McGee, I am Jim Derry. We'll see you soon, everyone. Have a great weekend. Happy Father's Day to everyone out there.
We are Tulane doctors. Physicians and scientists working side by side to advance academic medicine, develop state-of-the-art medical treatments, and provide inspired patient care throughout the Gulf South. Tulane doctors. The future of medicine is here.